Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Madisonville Marine. Great incentives year-round at Madisonville Marine. Great incentives right now. Get rebates of up to $1,500 on Skeeter bass boats now through Friday. Skeeter bass boats, rebates up to $1,500. Special deals on Yamaha outboard motors now through June 15th, and rebates up to $1,500 on G3 Suncatcher pontoons now through July 3rd. Folks, there is no better place to buy a boat. Madisonville Marine, to which Bob Hodge can attest.
Yes, I can.
Very good. All right. We asked the panel for the biggest issues and hurdles that are facing Tennessee this fall. We've gone through a couple of them. Fourth quarter woes. You're going to have to create a four-minute offense to try and grind out games. You're going to have to get some linebacker depth / work on your rotation in the front seven. Figure that out. Next up, there's one area that we all kind of put down as you're going to have to improve: offensive line. Offensive line was good last year. You look at the run numbers that Mike talked about earlier. It's hard to say, well, your offensive line needs to improve. You just had a terrific run attack. You did, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement on that offensive line still, which really says something about what that offense could be. A lot of that's going to come down also to, can Drew Richmond live up to expectations and hold down the left tackle spot, which could really help your team for the next 2-3 years if he turns out to be what you thought he was going to be. Thoughts on the offensive line, Josh Ward?
Yeah, the offensive line is fine if you want to compete in the SEC. I think they proved that last year. Remember 2-3 years ago, we're talking about, are they going to get the quarterback killed? We're beyond that conversation, but all of these topics are about, can Tennessee compete for an SEC title?
Yep.
And if that's the case, you need to be really good, in some cases elite, on the offensive line, and that starts with left tackle. They've got elite talent. Can that develop on the field?
And do you have the depth if someone, or when someone in this league, when someone goes down, do you have the depth there to remain elite? Some of these guys like Alabama, yeah, they've got a conveyor belt going. Is Tennessee to that point yet?
I think Tennessee's very close to that point. We won't know until the season gets going. But here's what a better offensive line, and I'll agree last year's was pretty good, so much better than the year before.
yeah.
But here's what a better offensive line does for you. Jalen Hurd hits the hole without having to sidestep somebody right as he gets the handoff. Kamara is going to be able to get around the edge without having to go a little bit deeper and get around somebody. And those things, Tennessee still got positive yards in those situations, but you were delaying the back getting to where he needed to be at the start of the play. So if you get an improved offensive line this year, I mean, you could be talking about reasonably Jalen Hurd doing something like 1,500 yards behind a good offensive line.
I think it's also going to be interesting to see, Mike DeBoard had one offseason to work with those guys last year. They implemented a lot of the pulling guard stuff. They had the center moving out there and Coleman Thomas. How much more is he going to put more in there now that he's got more time with them this whole offseason? How much more are you going to see? Is there going to be more to Mike DeBoard's run game playbook this year? You talked about there were times last year when they went a little vanilla in the run game late. Will they have more to show in that run game this time around?
Well, I mean, as they continue to work on it and the experience they have, I think if they stay healthy, there's no reason you couldn't have an exceptional year. But that's a big if.
Mike?
I don't know if the diversity of the running attack is key as much as the execution and the depth that you mentioned, John. I haven't seen a couple of championship drives from teams. They were playing a rotation of 8 or 9 offensive linemen to combat these 11-man defensive lines that we're starting to see with these tremendously talented teams. I liked what Tennessee did with their screen game. With Kamara, as you mentioned. I mean, I loved it. You could never really draw a bead on Dobbs because of that little dump pass. That was beautiful. To me, that's where I think the offensive line needs to be at least solid, especially at left tackle, and protect Dobbs because that's the franchise.
But it really took a while to work that in. That wasn't something that game one, you had there.
And we've talked about that too. I mean, the more times you give the ball to Kamara, you're taking it away from Jalen Hurd. The more times you start giving it to Kroom or to Wolf, the fewer you're giving it to Kamara or Hurd. So the positive is you got all these weapons. The negative is those carries can only go one place at a time.
Yeah.
So who's your best weapon? How do you use that weapon in the right amount of time? But I do think that when you look at last year's run game, it's hard to imagine them putting up better numbers. But I do think they can have a better run game. Whether that translates into numbers or not, I think it could mean controlling games a little bit better. If that makes sense.
Agreed. No. Well, we've talked about it.
Well, it's, and we all hated it. I'm pretty sure it's 3rd and 1, still a passing down at Tennessee. It's not supposed to be.
And that's what I was just getting ready to say. 3rd and 1, you ought to be good enough this year just to say we're running it and there's not a lot you can do about it.
And this is where you can hear people screaming at home, and give us a fullback. Everybody wants to see a
Don't give 'em the
fullback.
shotgun.
Don't give the shotgun on 3rd and 1, give us a fullback. All right. When we come back, some folks are talking about, some players have talked about an undefeated season. Butch Jones has shied away from that. Managing expectations, managing the hype, dealing with adversity when it comes. That's another huge hurdle for this team to clear if they're going to win championships. We'll discuss that. Come on back on the Sports Source.